Good afternoon, friends, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. David Wright here, and I am your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by Manjit Rana. Manjit, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Absolute pleasure to join you. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know it's been a little while coming here. Manjit, for those of our listeners who may not be familiar with your journey, could you just tell everyone a little bit about your current role?
Sure. So I am currently the executive VP, covering everything essentially this side of the pond. So from my accent, you can tell I'm in England. So I look after literally everything from the UK across the whole of EMEA and all the way across APAC region as well. Predominantly focused on scaling up Clearspeed, primarily across the insurance business, but also on the kind of non-military, non-government side. So a whole bunch of commercial interesting applications that we're involved in.
Yeah, and I'm excited to learn more about it. We do like to start the episode though, Manjit, with just one piece of practical advice you might look to leave our listeners with today.
I would say always look at challenges in the way that other people may solve those challenges. So I don't know, if you're dealing with a complex claim challenge, look at how an A&E consultant may solve something similar, because you'll get a bunch more insights and creativity doing it that way, rather than the bit I hear all the time is, "Oh, we have to do it this way because that's how we've always done it in the industry, or that's how we do it as an organization," and that kind of kills creativity, kills innovation. Um, and also frustrates the hell out of most people as well. So
Yeah, I love that advice. And that's been true for me. What I'm hearing and what is at the root of what you're saying for me is a level of humility in not being so stuck in one way of looking at things that you can't be open to other perspectives. In my experience, the perspectives that I've gained from lived experience or learning from other people, I mean, it would be nowhere near the same if I had just stuck static where, I thought I was and what I thought I knew.
yeah, and I think it's especially in the insurance world where I've operated in most of my life. Most people kind of go, "Oh," if you ask them how did they end up in insurance, they generally go, "Oh, I fell into it." Like other than the action, like virtually nobody else ever says, "Oh, this was a career that I always wanted to do since I was like 7 years old or something." Um,
Right.
so as a result of that, and they generally stay all the way through. It's quite rare to see, even at a middle management level, somebody working in an airline saying, "Oh, do you know what? For my next job, I'm going to go work for Allstate Insurance," or somebody at the C-suite level kind of going, "Oh, I've done 10 years in retail and now want to go look at insurance." It doesn't happen. So as a result of that, we kind of get the vast majority of people coming in at the ground level, and they just
Right.
grow inside the organization. So they never really experience anything outside of the world they operate in. And as a result of that, it's difficult for them to bring other experiences in. Um, and you'll know this as well as I do. Disruption very rarely comes from within an industry; nearly always comes from outside, and therefore kind of have to bring that outside in thinking and experiences and everything else. But unfortunately, it's kind of one of these industries where we just don't seem to attract people in typically from other industries. But hopefully we can change that going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully this will be a platform that we can promote those opportunities. And I have seen, it's funny that you mentioned that because a number of years ago, we saw this phenomenon where healthcare organizations, health systems started bringing in retail CTOs and CIOs or CIOs and CTOs from CPG organizations or, things like that. to disrupt and bring that fresh perspective. And, it was interesting that you mentioned the insurance people being, you know, at their organizations kind of for a long time. We've had a few people on the podcast from that industry, and that was generally their experience. But it's actually a good dovetail into, you know, learning a little bit more about you and your journey. So I'd love for you to kind of just walk us through how you started out and how you got to the role that you're in today.
Sure. So, and anybody that knows me generally kind of knows my background in terms of I grew up like literally from the age of like 6 wanting to be a fighter pilot. And so literally every weekend or my summer holidays I spent on RAF stations, like determined that was the only job I was ever going to do. When the Falklands War was on, I was at Biggin Hill going through my officer selection process. Um, and for various reasons, um, I didn't feel very welcome um, there. So that kind of put me off in terms of, I fought my family to get there. Um, and then the message I was given was, you don't fit. So I kind of decided, okay, I'm not really going to put my neck on the line day in, day out, fighting for a team that doesn't really want me as part of the team. So I got offered a place. So I got all the way through the selection process. I got down to the final four. Um, they offered to sponsor me, but I decided I was going to go off and go through university myself, fund myself, and then kind of decide what I want to do after that. So I went to university. In my work placement year, I ended up starting an Asian fashion business with £500. Ended up selling it 18 months later for £123,000. Um, so that kind of gave me the bug for doing entrepreneurship stuff and knowing that I could create something substantially bigger from virtually a blank sheet of paper. Because my dad was a bus conductor. He knew nothing about business. My mum was a machinist. She used to sew anoraks and tracksuits at home. So she couldn't really give me any advice. So I had to literally learn on the fly on how to solve. Um, I went back to university, finished my degree, then ended up working for an insurance broking software house. Luckily for me, it was probably one of the fastest growing tech companies in Europe. And when you're in a position, when you're working for a fast growing company like that, you generally get opportunities that you would never normally get. So at the age of 26, 27, I was working on some really big projects that I would never have normally got until I kind of got to my mid 30s or something. So I learned an awful lot, again, from just being dropped in at the deep end and told, go figure it out. And that included uh, the organization buying other companies and then basically saying, okay, you're now going to go in and help them design their strategy for diversifying out from what they're doing. And at that kind of age, you don't really know any different. You're quite bullshit. You're quite not arrogant, but confident in that you don't really know any different. Um, so from that, along the way, I've done some venture building. So I created Fujitsu Consulting's insurance business. I was involved in creating Sun Microsystems insurance business out across Asia. I was head of innovation at AXA Insurance, a major global insurer over here. But I've done kind of 12 startups as well. And they've been a range of different things. So I always describe it as I've tried to escape from the insurance industry by going off and trying to do something different, but I keep being dragged back in. So along the way, I've done a business magazine, which was kind of like an accident because it was a marketing project and it ended up being a business. So we sold that one. I created one of the very first dating platforms pre-smartphone. So kind of think about Tinder today, but using a Russian games console inside nightclubs to connect people. And that was a really fun project, but I lost a ton of money on that one. The tech just wasn't ready to do it, but the was incredible. And then I set up an innovation consulting business, which I ran for just over 10 years, sold that to a big European innovation consultancy, um, and then left and then looked at. So my clients were asking me to set another consultancy business up again, which I didn't really want to do because I've done it once. I don't like kind of repeating stuff. So I looked at how you disrupt a innovation consulting business. So we created a digital ecosystem. And then just as we were about to launch it, I was approached by the founders at Clearspeed and said, come and have a look at what we're doing. Would really love you to come and help us scale this business up into the insurance market. That's basically, in a nutshell, how I've ended up at Clearspeed. I still have a consulting business in the background run by somebody else. I still have a digital ecosystem platform, call it a dating platform for connecting insurtechs with insurers, investors, and advisors. So that's been run by somebody else as well. So they're my background pension projects. At Clearspeed's where I'm very much focused right
Very cool. And I find myself smiling the whole time because I just remember being that like sure-footed 20 some odd year old and, just being thrown into the deep end, particularly actually after starting disruptive innovations and just needing to figure it out. And I mean, in my experience from the entrepreneurs that I've gotten to know over the years and even more so through disruptive innovators, that flying kind of a little bit over your skis and, whatever the next right thing is, just like, and if you don't have the answer, just going and figuring it out. That's like how businesses are built, really. Like a client asking for something where it's not like, an absurd thing for you to go and figure out, like something so outside your realm of knowledge, but maybe it is somewhat, and then just going and making it happening and then rinse and repeat. That's really how we scale DI. I will say that the further I get into my career and the older that I get, the more experience I get, the less I realize I know.
Yeah. I think I kind of always look at life as a constant learning exercise session. And you don't know what you're going to, so, my philosophies are generally, you don't know. So the person that you're in front of, you don't know why you're going to meet them, but you are destined to meet them. So I kind of put it down to, if I'm sat on the train, I happen to be sat on this seat with that person sitting in front of me. They could very well have been sat on the other side of the aisle and I would never have connected to them. So there was a
Yep.
reason why they're sat opposite to me. And actually that has proven to be beneficial so many times because people will reach back out to you like several years later and go, hey, we met on the train. We were having this conversation. I'm working on a project and your name popped into my head and I felt we had to reconnect. So that's happened a ridiculous number of times, way more than for it to be a coincidence. And the
Yeah.
second is things happen for a reason. Um, so don't see that as a negative thing, see it as an opportunity to learn from, but also something will come out of it. And you were meant to have gone through that experience at that time. So I generally have a pretty positive outlook on life.
Yeah.
Result of that, I generally don't get stressed, really get wound up by stuff, but don't really see things as a disappointment. Kind of see them as it's either a learning opportunity or it's an opportunity to move forward with something.
No, it's a beautiful, uh, and serene way to live life. I actually here's amor fati, love one's fate. That's my one of my mantras. So I agree. Like and it's funny that the outlook of looking at those interactions or experiences as opportunities and it's just a shift in your mind and your outlook. My circumstances don't change. Same thing goes for what I previously might have perceived as bad or good, right? I can say now, looking back, that some of the most difficult moments in my life, the most emotional or um, sad, or and having those emotions is normal, right? It's leading out of that. What's my experience? And my experience today is I'm so grateful for those experiences because they've shaped who I am, and created kind of a beautiful life. So I agree with you that. And now I try to go through life without expectation of anything. Like, I can have a goal for, like, the business or for a project or whatever, of course, right? But there's so much that is truly outside of my control that,
Absolutely.
all I can do is the next right thing. And, you know, something still might not go well, and that's okay, basically.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if you can't control it, don't stress over it.
Right.
Kind of
And
within the boundaries of how you can use it to your advantage. Um, yeah, it makes life a lot nicer to live. So
I agree. And I think that, it's funny, and then I'll move on. It's just, this is a great topic. But I, at this point in my career, in my life, I have never been busier. And with my businesses, because I have a couple startups too, and the family, I've 1 and a 3-year-old, like we talked about, and they're all gifts, and I'm so grateful for them. And never been busier. If I was this busy 10 years ago, I would have my head so far up my own, what, like, I'd be like, oh my God, like, the stress. Oh, what am I going to do? Don't they know? Like, and today it's just, uh, I'm just walking along the path, and wow, thank God things are happening this way. And I can feel and experience pressure of everything and not let it manifest into stress. I can do the things that I need to do to take care of myself, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And then as I just walk through things, there can be difficult conversations, there can be difficult emotions, but I don't need them to rule my life.
I think some of it also comes from, so, a lot of my friends for the last 10 years, they've been, you're at a dinner party and the conversation's like, oh, can't wait till I retire. You go, so you're going to spend the next 10 years, like, basically doing something you don't really want to do just so that you can do something you'd like to do. That's got to be, excuse my French, that's got to be a really shitty way to live 10 years, right? Um, Whereas touch wood, I absolutely love what I do. So, like, why would I want to stop doing this to go do something that I think is second best? Um, so that kind of doesn't make sense. That way of life doesn't really make sense to me. But when you're in that frame of mind, when you're thinking, oh, I can't wait till I get out of doing this, the slightest problem becomes way more stressful, becomes a way bigger issue than if you're genuinely enjoying doing something, kind of having the best hobby in the world and being paid for it. Like, what's there to get upset about?
Right. And I think that in my experience, because I know those same people, I think we all do. And I was guilty of it previously in my, like, I remember my first job out of college, I was so miserable, because I had always meant to go into technology, but I went into finance for a couple of years, and I hated it. Um, but it's when if I'm stuck in that type of position, I'm being ruled and driven by fear. I'm not moving, I'm not changing or taking that action because I'm afraid of losing what I have, or not getting what I think I need. So I stay static in that, position. And I don't take the risk that, like, you as an entrepreneur took when you started that next business and that next business. Cause and especially at first, at least for me, there was some, I mean, there's a ton of risk and there was some fear there, but it was about experiencing that fear and then doing the next thing anyway, that's, and like, I listen to a bunch of Brene Brown and stuff, and that's where courage lives. It's like when look the fear in the eye, but then you take the next right action and move through it. And, sometimes you might crash and burn, right? Like you mentioned that one company, it didn't go the way that you had planned. And I've certainly had those experiences. I had an event I took a bath on, but then it turned out that was the best thing I could have done because it led to all of this. Right. And the fact of the matter is I just don't know. I don't know what is going to come of it. And that's okay too. You know?
Well, the event thing's interesting. So I did some of the first, excuse me, short tech events. The first one was an option. Do I go to promote my consultancy business? Do I go spend 30, 40,000 pounds on sponsoring somebody else's event? Or can I afford to lose 30, 40,000 pounds on running my own event and still get way more attention than if I just have a logo on at somebody else's event? So that mindset change, but I can afford to lose 30 grand on this and I'm still break even. Or if I break even anyway, actually I'm quids up because I've made 30 grand that I would have spent somewhere else. So that just thinking about things differently means that you can do things that are a little bit more off the wall, a little bit more creative. So that very first event that we did, an InsurTech event, but we did it at the Mayfair Hotel in the UK because it has the biggest private cinema room anywhere. So we could use that as the presentation theatre. I didn't allow any insurance companies to present, even though it's an InsurTech event. But we had people like Amazon, Google, Facebook, BMW, and we gave them each an insurance challenge and told them to come and present how they would solve that challenge. But the feedback when we were putting it together, everybody in the insurance industry was kind of going, A, you're never going to get these people to present on stage. Secondly, they don't know anything about insurance. What on earth are we going to learn from them? And see, kind of like, why don't you just put a bunch of senior insurance executives on stage? I'm saying because they're not going to be able to tell you anything you don't already know. Like the whole point of innovation is look at how other people would disrupt your day-to-day stuff. And and we broke even on that event because it was a super expensive event, but it built my consultancy business overnight. And people were talking about that, for the next few years afterwards. But it's that mindset change. It's that mindset about how you go about facing a challenge. I also generally kind of think as well, the reason why startups are more innovative and creative than corporates is because of the constraints of money that they have. The minute you don't have access to a big budget, you don't have an option. You have to get creative. You have to get innovative to solve a challenge. Whereas if someone's saying to you, oh, here's $100K budget, go launch something, guess what? You're gonna go blow up. Yeah. And generally, corporates think that's the way to do innovation, and it isn't. Okay, don't constrain the finance so much that you end up strangling a project, but don't make it super easy where it's, I want to go launch a product and I can just go out and buy 3 cars and wrap them up and go launch it that way. Don't give me the money for the cars. I'm then going to have to persuade someone to loan me those cars. And actually, I don't need to own them. I need to borrow them for 2 or 3 weeks. But no, so you can get more creative and generally, that's why entrepreneurs generally come up with quite wacky, creative ways of solving challenges. But it's also why culturally they struggle to fit inside a large corporate because they don't really have that, not freedom so much, but kind of ability to flex their muscles and flex their thinking and everything else. So yes, I find it quite interesting when corporates take their head of claims and make them head of innovation. And my view always is like, what was the most innovative thing that guy did or girl did in the last 10 years? And they go, oh, but he wasn't allowed to because he was in claims. And go, so you've given him or her an innovation title, and you think overnight his DNA's changed. Like, it's not going to change. Now, you really need to bring in people that have a completely different way of thinking. Uh, and that's probably one of my big frustrations, in that we don't seem to bring entrepreneurs in to run innovation teams. And sometimes that's required, but sometimes you do need people that run innovation almost like a function within a business, almost like a HR department. HR departments don't manage your people. HR departments enable you with the tools and the processes to help you manage. So I don't understand why innovation has to be done by the innovation team. It's a support unit that should help provide you with the tools. And I think we're now starting to see a lot of innovation operations evolving into that model, only because the previous generation models haven't really worked that effectively.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I have seen that in pockets, often like with a profit motive surrounding like VC investment and stuff like that. Like, uh, but I digress. I wanna learn more, Manjit, about Clearspeed. Before we do, I always just like to ask a favorite book or literary piece that you've been reading recently or all time. Your choice.
Um, Honestly, I don't really read books. So I kind of live on 4 or 5 hours sleep. And so when I'm sleeping, I am out for the count. Um, Generally, the rest of the time, my brain is just working overtime, trying to work on stuff. So typically, if I find a book interesting, I will typically get it. I will leave it in the bathroom quite often. I'll go to the bathroom, I'll randomly open it, read a couple of pages, close it, pick it up next time, read another couple of pages, close it. So I can't think of the last book that I've read from cover to cover. Uh, but I generally get enough useful insights and theme out of a book. I listen to a few InsurTech podcasts, just to kind of get a view what other people are thinking. But it tends to be more magazines. I'm reading short art. So I like to capture knowledge in short, sharp bursts, as opposed to taking something from A to Z. Um,
Yeah.
so I have a really low boredom threshold. So that kind of stops me trying to focus on something for too long as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not surprising someone with your entrepreneurial, history. But I appreciate that, and I mean, honestly, I haven't been reading nearly as much for the same reasons. It's like work, 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 dad mode,
Yeah.
more work, sleep, is my like general, flow of
Yeah.
things.
My,
So I do
mine's
listen
like
to some
crash.
audio, but
Yeah.
yeah, crash, right. Uh, well, let's get into it. I mean, let's
I,
talk
I was,
about,
I was going to say that it just reminds me of a really, an interesting example. So I was at one of my sales team. We were driving to a meeting. So he's chatting away. I'm writing stuff on my iPad. And then when we stopped, he said, "Do you realize what you did?" I went, what do you mean?" He said, like, literally, I was talking, you were writing, and then your pen just stopped. It's almost like somebody had pulled a plug. And then after about 5 minutes, he said, it's like someone put the plug back in again and you just carried on writing. And I said, well, let's see where in the text I'd had that gap, and we couldn't see where it was. He knew where it was because he had to stop talking because I'd obviously crashed out. But no, it's literally like that quite often. Your brain just kind of goes, I need time out, and it just pulls the plug. And then when you've had enough juice, it'll put you back in again. So it's probably not healthy. I get that. But yeah, just reminded me of that story.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not surprising when you run it at 100. I mean, I had that moment on Friday. I had just it was like another one of those weeks where I was in like 4 or 5 cities in 5 days, and I got home. So it was like the travel where you get somewhere like 12:01, and then you wake up
Right.
at 5, and then you do it an 18, 19-hour day, and then you do it again, and I just crashed. I was by the end of it, I didn't know what direction was up, so I
And I think the partners don't realize what you, because they think, well, you've been out for a whole week, you've been traveling all over the place, you've been having great meals. Like the minute you hit home, you're crashing out. Like, why are we not getting that attention? But unless they kind of travel with you, they don't really realize the extent of the work that you're having to do. Uh, it is not stressful, but it is taxing. Um, no, but it sounds super glamorous to most people that are not doing this job,
yeah,
traveling
it's
around.
true. I gotta put you in touch with my wife, Manjit. You're
As
my
long as
representative.
I'm not talking to my wife, we're okay.
Oh, man. So, Manjit, I wanna learn more. So you're in this role overseeing innovation and technology and so on for, EMEA, for Clearspeed. Talk to me a little bit about Clearspeed as an organization, your vision for Clearspeed, kind of maybe some of the key initiatives you're working on. Just kind of catch us up on what you guys have been up to.
Yeah, sure. So, in terms of backgrounds, um, ClearSpeed is a fraud risk and analysis tool using voice. So I could ask you 2 to 4 automated questions. You just have to simply answer yes or no in any language. And I can tell you with very, very high levels of accuracy whether there is risk in your responses. So as let's bring it to life. Uh, let's say this was a job interview and I asked you a question, have you ever stolen anything from work? You're going to obviously say no. And in that burst of sound energy, when the word no comes out of your mouth, there are a bunch of audio signals which we can uniquely capture and measure. Now, if you kind of think about that, you can apply that to a whole bunch of different use cases. So, security, you're telling me you need to come into a US base in Afghanistan because you're helping in the kitchen today. I have no idea whether I can trust you or not trust you. You don't speak English. I don't know what your background is. I don't know who your friends and family are. I don't know what your motives are. But at the same time, I can't follow you around for 2 weeks. Um, you don't have any ID on you. Uh, but I have to make a decision pretty quickly as to whether I trust what you're telling me or not. And if I get that wrong, that's a life or death situation. So we can't operate at the 80, 90% accuracy levels because the risks are too big. So basically that's the underlying technology that was developed by a bunch of special forces guys, ex-military, no, very senior military SEAL officer, SAS, Marines. And now if you kind of take the basics of what I'm able to do. So essentially, if I can trust what you're telling me, would I run my business differently? Would I run processes differently? So if you submitted a claim saying that your Rolex watch has been stolen, and I can ask you a couple of questions and I can then decide actually you genuinely have lost that watch, I can settle that claim super quickly. Why do I even need to ask you for evidence of the lost watch? Because I trust what you're telling me. Equally, the technology is kind of going, hang on, there's something here that you really ought to investigate further. Then, then we put you down a different pathway. Now, that happens if we're assessing if people have a bias. So, in police forces, for instance, do the police officers have a sexist bias or a racist bias, or have they had a um, um, a background of violence or anything like that. Now, so A, at recruitment, B, during their career, we could make those kind of assessments. Force people. So rather than making every athlete pee in a pot or give a blood sample for you to assess if they've taken drugs or not, what if we just asked them and we could very accurately trust their responses? So
What's
that
the accuracy rate?
just under 98%. It is
Wow.
phenomenal. It is phenomenal. And it works on every human on the planet. You can't trick it because it's just a natural way that your brain works. So it's not AI, it's based on neuroscience. It doesn't work if you can't hear or you can't speak clearly because we have to capture that burst of sound energy. Um, but other than that, it pretty much works. Uh, so that they use, and I'll guarantee, you know, if we have another conversation tomorrow, you'll have come up with half a dozen other use cases than the ones that I've mentioned, where you can utilize this technology. So when I was approached by the founders, I found the technology fascinating, the market opportunity phenomenal, especially when we're in this space where everyone's struggling financially. We're going through a financial crisis. So that generally not promotes, but that encourages behavior that's not normal for that individual. So if you had a £3,000 utility bill and you weren't able to pay it, you are going to think about, okay, where do I get that money from? So maybe claiming on your accidental coverage on your contents policy saying the dog's knocked your 85-inch TV over. Like normally you would never have dreamt of doing that. But right now, in these circumstances, you are tempted, far more tempted to do something like that. So how do you detect that? Because most people generally use big data, profiling tools, rules to detect which people might fit that criteria, and then they kind of screen them. But you wouldn't, you wouldn't fit into that category because you would never dream of doing something like that. But how do we identify that kind of opportunistic, speculative type of fraud? And it's not just in insurance; it happens in virtually every industry. Um, you might get a phone call at home saying, "Hey, have you driven over a pothole recently?" Because you're allowed to have a free wheel check, and you get directed to a garage, and they go, "Hey, you've got a hairline fracture on the inside of your Range Rover wheel. We can fix it for £2,000. Don't worry, we'll claim it off the insurance." Yeah, and then as the word spreads around, more and more people are going to do stuff like that. But without examining every Range Rover wheel, how are you going to know which are genuine claims and which are not? The point is, you know whether that's a genuine claim or not. So the fact that when you're responding, I can ask you the question, and then based on your responses, I make the decision: do I trust the answers or not? We use this analogy of the metal detector at the airport. So imagine we didn't have those frames that we all walk through. We would have to employ tens of thousands of TSA agents. Everybody would have to be patted down. The queues would be crazy. The experience would be a nightmare. People would want to avoid flying like the plague. But actually now we walk through this frame. We're told, empty your pockets, walk through. The frame knows nothing about you, doesn't know your gender, doesn't know your age, doesn't know your credit score, doesn't know your background, doesn't know where you're coming from or where you're going to. It just simply looks for, is there any metal on your body? And when you walk through it, you're either going to get green light, in which case grab your bags, go to duty free, or you're going to get a red light. So we do that with voice. So we know nothing about the individual, simply can assess whether there is risk or no risk.
Do
That
you
kind of
guys
gives
have any no, that's yeah, I mean, it's super cool. And now, like you said, my kind of wheels are turning. Um, do you guys do any work currently with in like the healthcare space where like I'm a patient, I'm calling in to, authenticate? Is that something that or even for financial services companies that are looking to authenticate their users, like is that 98% 100% enough to authenticate?
So we can't authenticate the individual. So I don't know enough about you. So basically, let's say you're applying for a healthcare plan, so the insurance company might, during that onboarding process or during the quoting process, might say to you, um, "Hey, David, in order to fast track this onboarding, you're going to receive a text message. Click the link, answer the following questions." And you might get a question like, "Do you smoke?" You're obviously going to say no. "Do you have any pre-existing conditions that you've not declared?" You're going to go no. That's the end of the journey as far as the technology is concerned. We're then going to pass a result back to the insurer to say, should you trust the responses from that individual or and so the difference it makes is, if I didn't trust you, I would have to send you for a pre-med, which A, is going to slow down getting you on board. B, like, you're going to have to give bloods and everything else, which is not great. I mean, I don't mind it, but most people don't enjoy that experience. So if you could do this in a fast way, so equally at the claims end, let's say a workers' compensation claim. So you're making the payments out regularly, month in, month out. That person's never going to ring you up and go, "Hey, I think I feel well enough to go back to work. Can you stop my payment?" Yeah. So equally, it's quite expensive to keep calling them to validate and having an interview with them to to see if they still deserve the payments. What if you could automate that process? And yeah, every 3 months they get a text message, they click it, they answer the questions. So there's a whole load of other stuff in the background. So we can detect artificially generated voices. We can tell if somebody's trying to trick the system. We can tell if somebody's answered the first question, then pass the phone over to their wife to answer the questions. We can tell if someone's trying to avoid the questionnaire. We can tell if people are trying to whisper so they think it's going to get past the technology. Got to remember, the technology has been developed to try and identify, like, people that want to do seriously bad things. Um, yeah, absolutely. So the fact that we can use exactly the same technology to assess stuff that's not as serious, life or death situations, then it's the same technology. So we generally identify stuff at a way better level than anything else that's in the market. That makes it super exciting because, like, literally on a daily basis, people are ringing up saying, "Hey, can you guys help us track baggage handlers at the airport that are breaking open bags?" Yeah. Can you tell me if the profiles on this dating site are genuine or not genuine? Yeah. Can you tell us whether the students that have written their dissertation, final year degree dissertations, whether they've written them or whether they've outsourced them to someone in Malaysia or they've used Chat GPT to write some of it? Yeah. So all of that stuff's possible.
Wow.
Because I think that technology is super revolutionary.
Wow. Um, I mean, this has been so enlightening, um, and yeah, I agree. The applications are tremendous. We don't, I could talk about this for hours, I imagine, Manjit. We don't have a ton of time left. So my last couple questions for you. One would be, in the insurance, insure tech, or I mean, obviously you impact multiple industries, but what do you think will be some of the biggest changes as time passes in and around your industry, with the understanding that you don't have a crystal ball, obviously?
Um, I think if we kind of step away from Clearspeed for a second, and we just kind of look at the industry. So as we move towards, just one example, if we move towards driverless cars, what does
Right.
that do to the motor insurance industry? Because we still need insurance, but now in the UK we have 26 million policyholders that insure their cars. Like, none of them are going to need to insure their car, right? Because they're not in
Right.
control of it. They're probably not even going to own the car. So what does that do to the industry? But then if you kind of extrapolate that out and go, okay, what if we combine an RV motorhome as we describe it with a driverless car technology. Now that's going to disrupt the train industry. That's going to disrupt the airline industry for short haul flights. I don't need service stations on motorways because this year I'm going to get picked up in Nottingham. I'm going to get overnight driven to Paris. Then why I can sleep, I can work. Like, why do I need to stop? Amazon's probably going to be dropping food into the roof box of my um, driverless motorhome as I'm driving along.
Yeah.
Hotels
In
are
a
going to be,
drone.
yeah, it's all very possible. I don't need
Yeah,
hotel.
you're right.
Yeah, because my motorless home might dock into a docking station at a Marriott hub or something, and I sleep in there, but I can get out into the corridor, use a swimming pool, use it. So, a small trigger point when you extrapolate out disrupts the whole world quite dramatically. It's never going to happen overnight, but I think that's the kind of stuff that fascinates me and gets me
Yeah.
excited when you start to think about what can we do, what's possible, and actually then you think about who's actually going to disrupt. An insurance company is not going to disrupt motor insurance, but now is Tesla going to disrupt motor insurance, or is it going to be a hotel chain that's going to fund driverless motorhomes because actually that's a way for them to protect their revenue rather than building more hotels? But insurance touches everything. Like this world not operate without insurance. So everything that happens from a disruptive tech perspective has an impact on our world as an insurance industry. And that's the bit that I find fascinating. And that's kind of like the connected disruptive tech, the disruptive insurance, and the business models as well. Like why do we pay an annual premium? Why can't I insure my car on a journey by journey basis? Why can't my Porsche say who wants to insure the journey? Well, Manjit's in Nottingham, then who wants to pick up the risk when it's on the highway? And then who wants to pick up the risk when it goes to London? All
Yeah.
very possible as long as we think in those ways.
Yeah. Super useful and really, really cool. This has been great, Manjit. The last question I just like to ask all my guests is if you could go back 5, 10, even 15 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh gosh. I wish I knew then what I know now. Is probably
Yeah.
the only advice because at that point in time, I dealt with whatever challenges were there at the time. Um, so yeah, I would kind of say learn from everything you do on a daily basis. So, but I have no regrets about what I was doing 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because all of that's been a learning experience to get me to where I am today. And this is going to be a learning experience for where I'm going to be in 5 years' time. So it's all
Uh-uh.
good.
Love it. Manjit, this was great. It was an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We will catch you all next week.